meet you all. My name is Dylan. I'm a Solutions Engineer here at SnapLogic. If you've never heard of SnapLogic before, we are an integration company. But now with the emergence of Gen AI, we're becoming more of a composable agentic platform to not only support you guys in integration, but also being that feeding layer to any type of Gen AI solutions that you guys might build. So today at the foundation, we'll be talking about SnapLogic and how it can help, but we'll also be talking about some other aspects of integration and just doing some education on the space. So a quick agenda slide for us today. We're going to be talking about some common integration hurdles that we see in enterprises, how SnapLogic approaches these type of hurdles, kind of an education moment of how to operationalize iPaaS platforms, no matter whether it's SnapLogic or any type of different approach. And then we're going to end with AI and integration and broke it down into two segments of augmented intelligence and cognitive enablement. So really two big words there, but I'll help you kind of simplify it as we go through. So I've been in the integration space for 5 years now. Feels like 15, but I've worked with big companies like Workday, Adobe, and Palo Alto, and I've also worked with really small mom and pop shop that is spending no more than $10,000 on their integration platform. So I've seen from the most complex and the most vast to the most simple and very, very small. But what I tried to do is through all those experiences, I've tried to pick out the top 4 common hurdles that I see through all of them. So let's go through some of those now. So the first one that I've noticed was democratization. And this is the activity of trying to empower other users besides the core IT group, which at the core sounds like a great idea where you're like, okay, now we went from hand coding, we have this low code platform. I could just let everyone in my organization do integrations now. Theoretically that sounds great, but that is not how it works, right? Because if everybody's building integrations, after 12 months, you're gonna have all this disparate point-to-point integration floating around, a lot of them overlapping, you have security holes, and there's really no governance to it. So the idea of empowering other business units besides IT is a lot more complex than you'd imagine and requires a lot of balance of governance, speed, and control. The other aspect is a composable enterprise, right? So another kind of fancy word, but really all this means is trying to standardize or come up with a way to templatize or turn these integrations into microservices, because you might start off with 20 integrations, but you're eventually going to scale, and there has to be a way to optimize that process of either using pieces of integrations that you built in the past or either just templatizing these processes to make the expedition of building new integrations much, much easier. AI readiness. 3 years ago, this would not be on my slide. When I first started at SnapLogic, it was just integration and all the problems that comes with it. But nowadays, AI readiness it might be the top priority nowadays when I talk to people in business meetings, because it's a relationship that you would not think would fit together. Integration and AI, right? At the core, you would think they're completely separate, but the more you dive in to the core concept of it and how it would work within an enterprise, they're actually very, very closely intertwined, because there's no one closer to the data than your integration platform. So being able to have a platform that's able to cleanse that data, ensure data quality, ensure security and governance, while getting that data ready to be acted upon with these Gen AI solutions is extremely important. And the last one is digital experience. This is really just the ability to not only have integrations that connect all these different disparate systems, but also to expose this data and these solutions to outside vendors, whether through it's a simple webhook or an API or a B2B integration, be able to make it accessible outside your organization. So these are the 4 problems I see, and SnapLogic tries to help with all 4 of these different problems, and I think we actually do a very good job of it. So within one platform, we give you one unified interface for business and IT users to use a platform in a governed approach. It ensures a composable and modular enterprise architecture, so a lot of these pieces that you build throughout your journey are able to be reused. It's secure, it allows you to ensure data quality, and then of course you can expose any of this data outside your network with APIs and B2B integrations. So how do we do this? How does SnapLogic work? So being an integration company, the core concept is being able to connect to all these different sources. So whether it's a file system, an application, a database, an API, data warehouse, whatever it may be, SnapLogic is able to connect to those, deal with any type of format, ingest that data, and what we do is turn that into a data set in memory. So SnapLogic does not store or cache any of this data. So when I say a data set, I'm not saying that we store it. It's kind of built in transit at runtime. From that level, you could either go straight into your target, more of a pure ingestion play, but a lot of times people utilize SnapLogic for the ETL capabilities to orchestrate, transform, and enrich this data. And you could do that with out-of-the-box snaps, or of course with AI, you could just use natural language and allow large language models to do that transformation for you. That then turns it into a refined data set, and at that point, the platform is extremely flexible. So you can either do data integration and put that into a data warehouse for analysts to put reporting on top of, send it back to those source systems, i.e. app integration, once again, exposing that data externally through APIs or EDI, or just making sure that data is ready for that AI agent or AI integration that you're doing, either in SnapLogic or outside. And all of this is done within one single design and runtime, which you would think goes hand in hand, but if anybody in here is familiar with integration platforms, if they can do everything, a lot of times they've done it through acquisitions. So when one of these big companies swoops up another competitor and it seems like a powerhouse, still you have two completely different, unique softwares trying to mesh together. So even though in marketing speak, they're together, but a lot of times it's different infrastructure, it's different UIs. You're basically using two different systems. But with SnapLogic, you might have a team that's using us for data integration. You might have a team that's using us for API management, and another one that's feeding their AI models. It's all running on the same infrastructure, same interface, same everything. So it's not only easy for the integration team to manage, but also the infrastructure and security team doesn't have to approve everything once you want to do a new process or new integration. So next we're going to talk about how to operationalize these platforms. And this is more of just a general approach of how to make these type of processes as optimal as possible. So following the trend that we had on the other slide, you're dealing with all these different data sources. And what you do is ingest that into the SnapLogic platform, once again, in memory. But a lot of the times, to be as successful as possible, we have the core IT team own that SnapLogic platform just because there's so much data that's flowing through it. But normally, even if you're using a low-code platform, core IT is a bottleneck. Even if it's easy for them to build integrations, they're still the only ones that are able to do it. So within SnapLogic, we empower them to create a marketplace of assets. And these assets can be templates of these different integrations, agents that other people consume and don't even know it's SnapLogic underneath the covers, pipelines, APIs, you name it. This allows the core IT team to use their best practices to create this marketplace and then extend it to all these different business units. So one business unit might just use it as is. Another business unit might just extend upon that template or that best practice they built upon, or another business unit might just digitize that and expose it to its vendors or its customers as well. So still maintaining the control of the core IT team to govern those processes and those integrations, but also spreading the wealth to these other business units and allowing them to get use of this platform and get use of these assets, kind of what we talked about before of democratizing the platform. And once again, all this is on one single runtime. And if you wanted to, we see this a lot actually with financial companies, they want to do chargeback models. So God forbid you did want to see which business unit was using more data than the other, you have the ability to separate these out if you'd like. All right, the fun part, AI plus integration. Like I said, 3 years ago, I would meet with customers and it was just integration. And now I can't get 10 minutes to a call with someone just asking about AI. It's fun, but it's just like crazy how fast the world goes. So the first segment that we're going to talk about of how SnapLogic lives with AI is, SnapLogic for augmented intelligence. And that is really just a fancy word for data readiness, right? Because you might have other platforms that are handling your AI solutions, but as I mentioned before, the data that is being used for those solutions is just as important as the Gen AI solution itself. So a lot of the times we're dealing with raw data coming from, if we're working in retail, it's POS systems or, just applications that aren't fully ready to be used in these type of data lakes. So SnapLogic will take that raw data, and what we're able to do is cleanse and add an augmented layer of data on top of that. So classification, tags, adding behavioral trends on top of that normal, usually not very helpful data. We'll put that into a data store of your choice. It's up to you where you want to store this data. And usually you would think that would be Gen AI, but a lot of times it starts with analytics, right? A lot of times what people will take this cleansed data and allow their analysts to run analytics on top of the data to gain insights. But I'll explain to you why now that has evolved into more Gen AI solutions than anything. Because even if you're using something like SnapLogic to get that data there easily, there's a lot of other things that you have to consider, right? Because even though the data is ready, analysts don't work for free. It takes them time to build these reports and these campaigns or these promotions. And even though the data is ready in the store, do they have everything they need? If they don't have everything they need, how do they get access to it? Do they have to go back to your cubicle and ask you to run another integration to get them more data? Or is there a self-serve capability? Or how independent are they on other teams around them to get the data they need? And that last segment, I'll use this little pointer here, this is where the emergence of agents really comes in, where it's no longer static reports of you just have to use the data that's provided to you. Now, when you incorporate Gen AI solutions, we've all seen it. You can create data sets out of thin air sometimes as long as you have access to this data. So the emergence of Gen AI solutions has now pushed us into the evolution of agents. I'm sure some of these logos look familiar to you. I've used ChatGPT 5 times today. I don't even write my own emails. I just word vomit onto the prompt screen and I say, write me an email, take out the hyphens and press send. But there's a problem with that, right? I can ask it to write my emails, tell me, some cool sports stats. My Yankees are playing tonight. If I want to ask it about a stat of how they do in the wild card against the Red Sox, they can tell me that. But if I say, what are my top campaigns or what are my top opportunities in my company, or help me build my next campaign, it's going to say, what are you talking about? I don't have access to that data. It's going to hallucinate. It's going to try to say something that's right. So the emergence of MCP is trying to solve this, right? That is trying to connect that layer of these applications or these LLM clients that we all know and love, but also kind of opening up that walled garden of all that data that allows the large language model to answer that question, right? Now, if it has access to my campaign data, it can help me build a campaign, right? Or it can tell me about my top opportunities. So MCP is kind of creating that tunnel between these large language model clients and the back-end data to be able to start providing some of these insights. And SnapLogic's proposition is being able to connect these two different components together. And SnapLogic being so close to the data, all we had to do was give ourselves access to these large language models, and it was very easy for us to do. So how do we do that, right? So SnapLogic, you're really able to create as many different custom MCP servers as you'd like. And as I mentioned before, we're connected to all these different applications anyway. So if you have access to the data, you can create MCP servers. The capabilities are limitless. So a quick diagram here, you have a business organization. A lot of the times you're going to be connecting to an MCP gateway. And with SnapLogic, what we do is kind of pair that with an integration layer. All that is enveloped inside the SnapLogic application, governed with our security and access controls. And as I mentioned before, for the past 16 years, we've been connecting to all these different data sources. So now once you add the capability of security and creating MCP servers, the ability to create these servers is extremely easy. And now you don't have to wait for Salesforce to come out with their MCP server, right? And newsflash, they're spending all this money, these applications like ServiceNow, Workday, Snowflake, to create these MCP servers. They're not going to give them away for free. And organizations have 80, 90 different applications. You can buy an MCP server for all of them. You can. Companies have a lot of money, but you could run into that scalability issue and kind of relying on them to be MCP eligible. And what if they all have different securities, right? That's not up to standard. So a lot to worry about. But with SnapLogic, instead of waiting or buying these different MCP servers from all these different applications, right? As long as you have access to the data, you can create these different MCP servers within SnapLogic. And this is the last slide that I'll walk through. This is kind of a real life example of how we're doing this today. There was a company, that won't be named, but we all likely use it in our everyday life. But they wanted to create a Jira MCP server, but they didn't want all the aspects of Jira to be exposed in the server, right? A lot of times when you buy these MCP servers, you're opening Pandora's box, which could be great. But if you don't want everything available, it's not optimal. So what they wanted to do was create their own customized Jira MCP server and only open up access to about 4 or 5 different capabilities, which was to search Jira, create tickets, add comments, and update tickets. So instead of going to Jira and purchasing the MCP server, they already own SnapLogic. They just enable this capability. They're able to build their own MCP server, expose it as a URL, and now what they're able to do is allow other people and other business units to consume that MCP server, interact with Jira, query it, add different comments, create different assets. So very easily being able to create these assets, spread it across your organization, and start producing results on these different integrations. All right. So what did we learn today, right? We learned about some common integration hurdles for enterprises, how SnapLogic tries to help solve some of these problems, the importance of democratizing and operationalizing your iPaaS platforms, and then, of course, the power of AI and integration. So we'll be at booth 103 if you guys want to stop by and see us. And at this point, I don't know if I'm running up on time or early. If there's any questions I can help solve, I'm here to help. Go ahead, my friend. Correct. Yeah, we'll actually go back for that question. Yeah, so to that point, SnapLogic doesn't need to be a hero, right? So if you, for an example, if you wanted to create your own MCP server connected to these 3 endpoints, but you already owned Snowflake or GitHub's MCP server, yes, this doesn't, we don't have to be the source of all this data. We can also just connect to any other MCP server using an MCP client. Beautiful. Any other questions I can help answer? Either about AI, integration, things I've seen, things I've learned. Here to help. You got another one. Go ahead. I think people are going to start charging for APIs because, as you can see here, if you have access to the data and you have the ability to create an MCP server, what's the point, right? So if everyone soon can start creating their own MCP servers, Salesforce, Workday, ServiceNow, Snowflake, they're going to start charging you for the APIs. That's just my opinion. I could be completely wrong, but yes, that's something that I see coming in the future. And the last point I'll make, this is just a nerd comment. I think the emergence of MCP and the access to this data, right? If we go back 2 more slides and we'll wrap it up. The emergence of MCP and the ability to have access to this data, the ability to, or the need to use tools like Tableau or Power BI will still be necessary because they'll evolve to it, but the ability to create reports on demand in tools like Claude and Gemini, once you have access to that data, is ridiculous. So, the emergence of Gen AI, the emergence of MCP is going to cause disruption in not only the API space, but I also think in the analytics space as well. So very interesting, excited to be a part of, and I appreciate you guys listening. And like I said, come see us at booth 103 if you want to learn more. Thank you guys.